Hello, everybody. What's going on? Jeremy from the Independence Channel. Welcome to Real Truth. Again, I'm just a regular guy, certified by the American College of Sports Medicine as an exercise physiologist, but we see these things that have been occurring in our country for a very long time. Whether you watch the Jon Stewart, the Daily Show with Jon Stewart way back in the day, or even before that, you followed geopolitics with your parents when you were growing up. You remember seeing CNN on TV. You might see Fox News, whatever the case. And all of these people were involved in our perception of reality. And during the Trump administration or the Trump campaign of 2015 and 2016, you saw this establishment rise up, during which time the media and other influential entities would coordinate and collaborate with one another to basically undermine this administration. And it was beyond undermining. We're talking about a complete fabrication of reality. And this is when I started to really see not just I started to holistically see the corruption that was occurring in our government. And when I say holistic, what I mean by this is that I considered myself to be an independent mind, but I leaned conservative. So I did like John McCain, although I supported Obama in the 2008 election. I bought into the whole change thing. I was willing to give up my ego. I was willing to give up this thing where I'm not going to vote for a guy just because he's black. I want to see what the policies are. I want to see what the changes are actually going to be. I'll give a person a chance, right? So anyway, but I did like John McCain because he was a war veteran. I happen to be a war veteran myself, so I relate. It's a part of who I am. But I started to see these bureaucrats really manipulate the perception of reality. And it was then that I started to look back into our elections and campaign financing, especially after you started to see career politicians accusing Mr. Trump of that which they themselves have been getting away with for decades in many cases. Okay? So this really sparked an interest on my behalf. I became intrigued with John McCain. I became intrigued with why people who I considered to be conservative were turning their back on John McCain. And you could talk about the thumbs down with the repeal of Obamacare, which we can get into in another episode. But I want to go back to post 9/11, okay? Because 9/11 changed us forever, but not in the way that they want you to believe, okay? This is the subversion of our perception of reality, of our consciousness, okay? And so everything after 9/11 changed, during which time the federal government and the bureaucracy have been able to implement through various legislative processes and events. They've legislated and started to implement these policies that favored the securitization and the financialization of our elections and our legislative bodies, okay? So, for example, the McCain and Feingold Act, or the BCRA, the Bipartisan Campaign Reform Act, was legislation brought about in 2002 that was under the guise of the virtues of the grassroots movement. And these virtues was an effort to remove big money from campaigns. And they wanted to distinguish campaign money from special interest money, which was targeting specific candidates and thus unethically and unfairly influencing our elections. And this was labeled as a bipartisan effort to close such loopholes in our system. All right, so powerful entities would attack this legislation through the Supreme Court over time, especially over the next decade, where the Citizens United decision led to other court decisions that set in motion our current crisis that we unknowingly find ourselves in, and that's why I'm here doing this video. So what was Citizens United? Citizens United was a decision in 2010 declaring the McCain and Feingold Act unconstitutional. So The 2002 legislation ran for about 7+ years. And during that time, you had a lot of special interest groups attacking this decision. And the purpose of this was to declare that legislation unconstitutional. And this would end up leading to the creation of super PACs, all right, which then allow individuals and corporations to combine their unlimited contributions to influence elections, even before they take place. Case in point, during the 2016 DNC primaries, where, as Barack Obama's presidency drew to a close, the DNC was deep in debt. All right, key word here, Debbie Wasserman Schultz. In return for a bailout, the DNC chair, Debbie Wasserman Schultz, gave Hillary Clinton's campaign more potential control over its operations and hiring decisions than was neither ethical or wise. And so basically what happened was the DNC was going broke, and Debbie Wasserman Schultz, who was the DNC chair at the time, allowed the Clinton campaign, who at the time had large corporate donations. I mean, they all do. Hillary Clinton just happened to have a lot more, donated and injected a lot of that money into the DNC. And the deal was, part of the deal was that the Clinton campaign would be in charge of the hiring decisions and control over its operations, basically. Okay. And this included moving the headquarters to New York, right, which was Hillary Clinton's headquarters. All right. So this gave Clinton an unfair and unethical advantage of locking in endorsements and endorsements of delegates, rather, regardless of popular individual vote, and hand selecting funders early on, this undermining the consciousness of the individual voter. So this leads to elites and interest groups actually pre-selecting a candidate despite the opponent's popularity. Donna Brazile would write about this in her book Hacks. I highly recommend this book. Ted Cruz and the RNC, the Republican National Committee, attempted the same assault against the other populist candidate in Donald Trump, during which time they diluted the field with 16 candidates, attempting to weaken Trump's overwhelming popularity enough to garner super PAC support and the required delegates for each respective state. The establishment heads, like John McCain, legislates these supposed protections and then uses these methods to suppress the populist vote. All right. So basically what is happening with these super PACs is that they are able to garner support in a way that takes delegates away from the independent voters. So even though we go and independently vote, we actually have our votes suppressed, all right, by the super PAC agreements with the delegates, the delegation, all right, with the delegates. And so Bernie Sanders ends up losing, what I understand, 11 states during the 2016 primaries. And so you end up with special interest groups, corporations, donating an unfair amount of money into our elections, okay? And basically, this gives them more authority over the independent vote. Now, why is this a problem? If they are not limited, and the Citizens United vote did do this, it led to super PACs being created, and this is what super PACs do. They financialize our elections. They financialize the institution itself, okay? And so they have opened the floodgates wide for people to invest through special interests and corporate donations. This is a problem because corporations aren't paying taxes. Not very much anyway, right? Not compared to what they make. Remember, money flows through corporate banks. So what not appears to be happening, what is happening is that you have corporations and special interests that have more power than the independent voter. Corporations are not paying their fair share of taxes. The middle class are. If our elections are controlled in this way and manipulated in this way, and they are reducing our own independent influence on our own elections, and because of our predatory corporate capitalistic system that we all agree, doesn't matter your blood, creed, race, whatever identity you want to negatively perceive yourself as or incorrectly perceive yourself as, instead of basing who you are off of your own character and actions. It does not matter who you are. Your cost of living goes up because of predatory corporate capitalism. And while your cost of living goes up, they pay fewer taxes and they actually have more representation. In my mind, this is taxation without representation. So getting to the point, in my opinion, the McCain and Feingold Act was simply a political and theatric feint designed to set in motion a number of successive Supreme Court and Circuit Court decisions that gave equal rights to corporation and special interests that have led to massive voter suppression. These elected officials then used the financialization of legislation to indebt taxpayers, while simultaneously devaluing our currency and economy, while injecting large swaths of money into corporate buybacks. The taxpayer is now in debt, and the cost of Western corporate consumption significantly increases. This is inflation. And a corporation has more say in who gets elected than the taxpayer. If the taxpayer is being taxed and their vote suppressed by shady bureaucratic super PAC manipulation, isn't this taxation without representation?
No federal taxes for dozens of big profitable companies. FedEx and Nike are among those found to have avoided U.S. tax liability for 3 straight years. Doesn't that piss you off, Ryan, when you actually have to pay taxes?
No, I find it thrilling. I'm glad that my tax dollars help out these struggling mom and pops like FedEx and Nike and Amazon and Walmart.
Explanation, please, let's say from the individual who oversees tax-exempt organizations for the IRS.
They used names like Tea Party or Patriots, and they selected cases simply because the application had those names in the title. That was wrong. The IRS would like to apologize for that.
Oh, okay, thank you. I appreciate. Wait a minute! I didn't realize apologies were sufficient in IRS-related issues. Hold on one minute. I bet, if I'm not mistaken, that right now, Wesley Snipes feels like a real ass